You know what I like? Howard the Duck. And you know what's even crazier? I like the movie poster. No, of course I don't like the bloody movie, it sucks. But as a kid, I was so sucked into this brilliantly designed movie cover that every time I went to Blockbuster I would literally stop and stare at this cock tease of some awesomely designed box art, before my folks would eventually pull me away and choose something worthwhile. And although the awful movie did nothing for me, or anyone to be fair, I still really enjoyed the look of the character, which is why I bought this. Yes, it might have taken some of Marvel's more well-known characters to get the video game treatment, but with the George Lucas movie that featured Lorraine Baines from Back to the Future, Tim Robbins from The Sure Thing, and Jeffrey Jones from Your Children's Nightmares, it seemed like the right thing to do. On paper, Howard the Duck looks like it was going to be a bloody good movie, and although I never did actually go and rent the bloody thing back in the day because, well, there was Mega Drive games to go and rent on the other side of the shop, I did eventually get the Activision released home computer game on one very soggy Christmas morning in the late 80s. So, did the game live up to the hype of what my imagination was preparing me for, thanks to the awesome box art that was replicated quite nicely on the game's cover too? No, it didn't. Welcome to Slope's Game Room.
I'm on my way.
Howard the Duck. This little guy here, well, in Funko form at least, for whatever reason has always stuck with me, which is why I lost my mind in 2014 when he appeared in the excellent Guardians of the Galaxy movie, and then again in its sequel. So, who is this angry looking Donald Duck rip-off looking character? Well, before we look at the big downfall that was the movie and the game, perhaps we should, in true Slope's Game Room fashion, go back to the beginning. Marvel. No, not this Marvel. This Marvel. If you was a kid back in the early days of this quality company, these old school comics were the best thing since perfectly cut slices of baked flour, wheat and yeast. But as you grew up, the comics didn't, and as all of the big publishers tried to find something new that would perhaps appeal to a broader audience, some pretty bizarre creations ended up being made, some of which became fairly popular like Ghost Rider, and others, not so much. Yep, Man-Thing. I'm not exactly holding hopes for this one joining the Marvel Cinematic Universe, although I wouldn't be surprised if Funko's already released a Tesco exclusive variant pop of Man-Thing with a fez hat, so go get that if you want. The thing with Man-Thing was that it was a Marvel character that couldn't talk. The idea was, if he touched you and felt fear, you would burn. Seems a bit crap, right? Well, would you believe that this Man-Thing got a bloody movie in 2005? Granted, it was a Sci-Fi Channel movie, but still, it happened, as did the brief cameo in Marvel vs. Capcom 3. Anyway, like I was saying, Man-Thing can't talk, so they created a fair few supporting characters to push the story along somewhat. And one of those characters was, of course, Howard the Duck. Now this Daffy Duck looking moody uncle type with a smoking addiction character was made simply to be a visual gag that would only last a comic or two, something that would add a bit of humour to an otherwise pretty bland looking comic. Well, as you can imagine, the author didn't originally care too much for Howard the Duck, and in the very next comic, Howard the Duck was killed off, and that was the end of that. But obviously it wasn't. People seemed to really like the character, and before you knew it, he became a little bit of a legend for those old school comic book readers that fancied something a little more grown up and comical. And it was because of this, Howard the Duck came back, and even started his own comic series in the mid-70s. So, the story goes that Howard is from another alternative reality, pretty much similar to ours. Only difference is, everyone's a duck. Well, unfortunately for him, Howard accidentally got sucked into our world and accidentally landed in the Florida Everglades, hence the whole Man-Thing, thing. Now, because he's from another reality trying to fit into this human world, he sees things from a different perspective as us and questions the way we go about our everyday life, and it's not uncommon for him to poke fun whilst doing so. On top of this awesomely dry, comical and most importantly fresh new spin on the Marvel Comics, he also found himself pulling on those nostalgic heartstrings that the readers would have for old comic books from their youth. But on top of that, he actually went up against a few of his own enemies too. And what would such a ridiculous character go up against? Why, ridiculous bad guys, of course. There's Garko the Frog, Prorata the financial accounting wizard, Dr. Bong, and of course, Bessie the Hell Cow, who, by the way, actually got a mention in Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D.
What sort of hell cow produces carmine milk?
Oh no, file just says Bessie. You two, come with me.
So, the movie, as you all know, is universally panned, and for good reason. That sarky charm and stupidness found in the original comic run is nowhere to be found in this movie. And although as a kid I did find the odd clip pretty funny, I suppose, as a whole it was way too dark and boring for a young lad and way too kidified for an adult. An interesting look at one of Marvel's first major movie releases, which ended up being so bad that it scared movie investors away from adapting other comic books, something that nowadays seems pretty unbelievable. And as far as video game adaptations go, well, sadly, this one wasn't any better. So let's take a look, shall we? Well, firstly, the positives.
Go.
The box art. It looks bloody awesome, and they captured the original movie poster bloody perfectly. But on the back of the box, yeah.
What if your two best friends suddenly disappeared? What if they were being held prisoner in an active volcano by a dark overlord? What if to save them you had to jump over quicksand, cross treacherous rivers, fight off an army of mutants, brave winds in an ultralight aircraft, parachute into the mouth of a volcano, do battle with a dark overlord, and somehow stop the volcano from erupting? Got it figured out? Now, what if you were a duck?
Haha, colour me sold. So far, so good. Not looking so good now, Howard. So apparently Beverly and Filsey have been kidnapped, and it's your job to save them. Now, in all fairness, the game doesn't actually look that bad, but it's the gameplay that looks and feels awful. I mean, would you look at that jumping animation? And the fighting in the game is really bad. But the icing on the cake is the jetpack. As you can see at the bottom of the screen, you've only got 30 minutes to get the job done, and about 10 to 15 minutes in or so, you would have seen the exact same scenery over and over again. But would you look at this? It's a bridge. Thank God, something actually different. How bland is this game? Eventually you find the volcano, and with a massive bazooka and a wobbly bridge, you defeat the Dark Lord. Look, that's him right there. You do this with 3 shots and you turn off the volcano switch and the game is over. Here's your medal. Easily one of the very worst games I've ever played, and most definitely worse than the movie. Without a doubt a contender for anything found in these books, in my opinion.
Hello.
What the hell went wrong here? I mean, sure, the source material was a bit naff, but why not try and at least replicate the story from the movie? There was enough going on here to make a selection of noteworthy minigames that would most definitely work better than this. Well, when you dig a little deeper, you realise that the game wasn't exactly high on Activision's priority list. I mean, heck, the publisher also had the rights to such properties as Big Trouble in Little China, Rocky Horror Picture Show, Aliens and Labyrinth, which all came out at a similar time. The world of entertainment hasn't been kind to poor old Howard the Duck, and although everyone looks at this awful movie which spawned an even worse video game as the real cause of his downfall, would you believe that his fall down the rabbit hole started quite a bit before these catastrophes, and by a company that you wouldn't expect? Disney. Yep. The company responsible for pretty much every major comic book blockbuster over the last half a decade or so actually filed a lawsuit against Marvel because of Howard the Duck's similarities to their hugely popular Donald Duck. You see, the big problem here, other than the obvious look of the character, is the name. Not Howard, but Duck, because in certain parts of the world this little bare-ass sailor was so bloody popular that a lot of people associated the word duck with Donald, and therefore Disney was worried that this crude cigar-smoking duck would be associated with the child-friendly Disney brand. And with Disney being the powerhouse that it is, Marvel didn't want to fight him, and instead decided to change the style of their duck to meet Disney's guidelines. As you can imagine, the creator of Howard, one Steve Gerber, wasn't happy, and ended up creating quite a few comics completely mocking this decision, with one enemy even going as far as throwing Howard into a Blandertron machine that would make him less of a negative character. On top of this, Steve pretty much fully ignored the request put forward by Disney and Marvel. Eventually, along with falling behind deadlines, the Howard the Duck comics ended up being given to another writer. And even though Steve started up legal proceedings claiming that he owned the duck, he didn't. Howard was owned by Marvel, and they could pretty much do whatever they wanted with him. It was at this point that not only did the comics, or should I say magazines at this point that Howard started featuring in, turned a bit boring, unfunny, and obviously completely different looking as the new writers and artists completely stood by Disney's demands. And it was this new crappy duck that eventually spawned the movie that spawns the game. However, there was one small light at the end of the tunnel. And no, I'm not talking about that Guardians of the Galaxy cameo. You see, whilst this lawsuit was going on, Steve Gerber created Destroyer Duck at Eclipse and Image Comics, and after that character got passed on several years later, he got asked to make another Destroyer Duck comic with Savage Dragon, which at first he turned down. The same thing happened when Marvel contacted him and asked him to make a Howard the Duck crossover comic, and again he said no. Until he came up with the brilliant idea of accepting both offers at the same time. The idea would be that both crossovers would cross over, which they eventually did in the final showdown, where Howard the Duck became cloned over and over and over again. Anyway, not so long story short, the comics ended with these massive fight panels, but in the non-Marvel version, you can actually see a few extra panels showing Destroyer Duck and Savage Dragon finding the real Howard the Duck amongst all of the clones, as well as his girlfriend Beverly, and then decide to take them back to their rightful owner, aka Steve Gerber at Image Comics, and leave a clone of Howard the Duck with Marvel. The cherry on the cake is the final page in the Image comic, which was a complete parody of Howard the Duck's first ever issue. In other words, as cool as this is, it's not Howard. And can Marvel do anything about it? Not really, because Steve Gerber is now dead. Hey there guys, thanks for checking out this rather oddball video of mine, and a special thanks goes out to Kelsey Lewin, who provided her fantastic vocal notes to the episode. And now it's the part of the video where I do my usual Patreon shout out, with a special shout out going to Matthew Ritter, Ryan Burford, Phil Lowlins, Ian A. Chapman, Gavin Gurevezezez, Creamy Elephant, James Loveridge, Casey Garner, Blitz Hedgie, Ben Hall, Taylor Ullman, Sinkiller J. Takikawa, and Tiago Piera dos Santos Silva. If you want to be part of my Patreon list, get your name shown, get your name shouted out, see exclusive stuff, share your content in the Discord channel, see what I'm working on and everything else, then please click the link that you see on the screen. Don't forget to subscribe, chuck it all over social media, do everything you gotta do to make my channel blow up. But for now, this is DJ Slope signing out, and hopefully I'll see you all next time.